Yeah, the shoe, like I did like 6 months in the shoe. It's how I lost all the weight, really, because you're only eating, 3 meals a day, and it was miserable. It's like you're very claustrophobic because you go from, that was like my first night in prison was kind of like in a shoe type setting, but I was only in there for a couple days. And then you experience the freedom of prison in the yard, but then when that's taken away from you and you're in a room half the size of this, and when you have a cellmate and he's shitting and farting and peeing in front of you on the toilet, and you can't leave. I think that's like the worst part about it. It's just like you're in this room confined there. You only get 3 showers a week, which they come and they handcuff you and move you to a different cell, which is like also a shower. Some shoes do have a shower built in, and you're forced to just read or do push-ups or sit-ups. You're taking once a day for an hour in the morning, Monday through Friday only for rec. So every time during the weekends, you're always locked in your cell. You get to talk to people. You talk to people through the bars. At one point, I became like the orderly, and they called me Squints from the Sandlot, and I was like painting the cells in Danbury. But I would say that was the worst aspect about prison.
Thank you for tuning in to the Mike Squires and Friends podcast. You can support by subscribing on YouTube or downloading on your preferred podcast platform. And definitely go do that because it helps us grow and I can have more incredible guests on the podcast. The Mike Squires and Friends podcast is proudly sponsored by DistroKid. Looking to broaden your musical horizons as an artist? Discover DistroKid. With its smooth and rewarding music distribution platform, DistroKid offers unlimited uploads while ensuring artists retain 100% of their royalties and earnings. Join the community of over 1 million artists who trust DistroKid to distribute their music across major platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, TikTok, Tidal, and so many others. Having personally used DistroKid since 2018, I can attest to their superiority amongst distribution services. Collaborating with fellow artists has become effortless, especially with the ability to easily send splits of songs, streamlining the creative process. With the DistroKid app, accessing these benefits is now more convenient than ever. Safely sign up or log in with 2-factor authentication, upload releases on the fly, monitor earnings, and withdraw funds from your DistroKid bank. Stay updated on royalties through push notifications, effortlessly share hyperfollow links, manage account details seamlessly, and track streaming stats from Spotify and Apple. Additionally, explore Mixia for professional-grade mastering, DistroVid for music video distribution, and Instant Share for secure file sharing with collaborators, producers, and more. The DistroKid app is available on both iOS and Android. Download it today from the App Store or Google Play Store to revolutionize your music career. Visit distrokid.com/VIP/Mike Squires to get 30% off your first year membership. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Mike Squires and Friends. Today, I'm joined by a longtime friend of mine. To be honest, the Mike Squires and Friends podcast probably wouldn't exist if it wasn't for this individual right here in front of me. Ian Bick, welcome.
Thanks, Mike. You know what's funny now that you said that is that it took me months of procrastinating to start TikToks because you kept pushing me, and then I did the same thing to you, and you procrastinated to start your podcast for months, and then you finally did it.
Well, that's one thing I really love about our friendship, and it's funny, though, too, because after I did your podcast, a couple people reached out to me like, how the hell do you guys know each other? And like, I'm like, oh, I've known Ian for over a decade now, but we have this friendship where it's like I feel like we're always pushing each other to level up and be better too. And that's like something that I just enjoy about our friendship because a lot of people don't take that entrepreneur path. A lot of people don't take that risk, the jump off the ledge. So I don't know. It's just something that I really appreciate about our friendship because I think we're like-minded, you know?
Yeah, it is pretty crazy and how our worlds are starting to cross, like when I was with Jelly and brought you up and, you know, just like you're very big in your space and I'm becoming something in my space. So it's interesting now that we're seeing like a crossover.
It's fun though, too, because the thing about this journey, like the journey of an entrepreneur can be very lonely, you know, and I'm sure, as you know, those grind nights. So it's like to have a homie or a friend that, you know, you could come up with and, you know, talk about building a jail cell in your thing and it makes sense to somebody. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
I think the thing I like about you is like you get it when I'm like in work mode and I get it when you're in work mode. Like when you're talking to someone, like the person's paying attention, but they're also grinding. And I think people that aren't like that don't understand that, you know? like we go from one thing to the next, you know, like it's, you don't get, there's no downtime in that sense. It's go, 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 go all the time while multitasking with, like, you were coming in, I was downloading footage, you're telling us a story, but you can't stop. Like, you have to keep going.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. It's just like you got to keep going no matter what. And at the end of the day, if you're trying to make something for yourself, you just have to do it yourself, you know? And like you can have friends that are there to ride with you the whole way, but at the end of the day, Ian drives Ian's car, I drive Mike's car, but you want to be in the race together, you know what I mean? And you know. But I want to talk to you about your story, dude, because obviously I've known you forever, but I want to bring it to days before I knew you, dude. So, before I knew you, you would wear a suit to school.
Yeah. There was a point in time where I'd wear a suit and tie to school. It wasn't a nice suit. It was like whatever blazer. I think my parents took me to like Kohl's or Marshall's and I got blazers. And my dad had like a funky tie set, like with different fish and designs. And I would get, he would tie those ties for me every morning. And then I would have like a pair of jeans or khakis, or because I was like always a little like chubby. So I would like wear like kind of like comfortable clothes. And that was my look. And I think I wore it with like a pair of beat up dress shoes, which I would inevitably wear to the trial and court proceedings. And then I'd have like button down shirts sometimes, but I carried around a briefcase and that was nerdy teenage Ian.
Yeah, and to me that just shows that you had that entrepreneur spirit in front of you, because what other kid was wearing a suit to school? Like, why do you think you were doing it?
I mean, there was a kids at DECA wearing suits to school and stuff, but I think to me it was all about being different. Like, I love being different, which is like why, like, when you come into the studio, like, you see everything on the walls and stuff. Like, it's just so different. Like, people would think that's cluttered, but to me, that's like a work of art. Like, you saw the studio when it was nothing.
Yeah,
we filmed that. Chris, were you here for the Chris Webby episode?
Yeah, or I don't know. No, maybe I was. Maybe I wasn't. I know that I know
you made it happen.
I made it happen. I don't know if
actually,
you know what, I was here because Pat was here too.
Yeah, so you were here that day. Did you shoot it for me, or Shane shot it, but you were
still
still
just hanging
here?
out.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's evolved so much.
Oh, yeah, dude.
I mean, the studio we're in now had black curtains. This table was double. The lighting was crap. We had one camera. Remember, I'd have to borrow one from you or from Shane because I was using the one rented camera.
And there's something to be said about that, because I think a lot of people, when trying to get into whatever they're trying to do, they feel like they need to have the whole process figured out right away. And the truth is, you just got to start where you can and then build it and figure it out along the way.
Yeah, it took me a year to get to, this. Like, I didn't have everything at once. When we got in, I was renting cameras, and I rented a second one. Then I rented a third. Then I was able to buy them. And it's a process. And you're constantly enhancing. I mean, you find new lights, ways to go about it, different things, and you learn as you go.
Yeah. I want to continue on your journey, though, too, because I'm going to bring it back, and then I'm going to bring it all the way to present day, dude. So I want to talk to you about some of the school dances, because you basically put those together way back in the day, correct?
Yeah.
So, what was the moment where you got the responsibility of doing that?
So me and my childhood best friend had gotten into trouble foaming these cars. We got caught, got sentenced to community service, so I started this project called Fight for the Homeless, where we, sold those like Live Strong type bracelets that I bought online, or that my dad bought online for $1 a piece. It said Fight for the Homeless on it, and the proceeds went to the local homeless shelter. That evolved into me doing a school dance that I convinced like the principal to let me do. And from there, like simultaneously, I'm starting to throw house parties at my parents' house, and I'm getting this reputation as like the popular kid and the business kid. And, between the parties and the dance, it made me realize this could be a business. If I charge kids that would pay $20 to go to a dance, if I cut that price in half and get them to go to a place like a club where there was no chaperones, where you didn't have like, you can't grind with each other, you could come technically drunk without there being a strict rules because there was breathalyzers at the dances, and you can listen to music with swear words in it, like the Lil Jon days and stuff, then there could be something there. It could be a business. So that's where kind of the idea formed, and I just ran with it. I called myself This Is Where It's At Productions, because if this is where it was going to be at for the night, then that's where, it was a play on words. And I just created this party promotion business, and at its peak, I was making like $10,000 a night once a month in high school. I was 16.
So I know a lot of the trouble you got into was pre-Tuxedo Junction. So was it after this is where it's at? And then at what point does things start to get hairy for you?
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception with my story, and a lot of that had to do with like the papers and everything, was my whole case had nothing to do with the club. I got in trouble at the club from like liquor violations and state charges, but the club was legit. We just didn't have any money because we kept losing, but the club was a legitimate business. Like we booked big acts, we sold tickets, everything was legit. If an investor invested and it lost money, then they were total lost money. That like came at the tail end. That was like my last hurrah. I had the club while the federal case, while the trial. I remember like the Carnage show. I think we talked that day. I was literally coming from the trial to the doors opening there. So the case really stemmed from me as a concert promoter, raising a bunch of money when I was 17, 18 years old, losing it all, lying about it, and that's kind of what started it. And I was booking big acts with that money. It just all lost, a series of unfortunate events. And then after the investigation started, I found myself back booking big events, but this time at my own location, kind of going back to my roots of the club scene.
What do you think would have happened if you had just been honest and to the investors were like, I lost your money?
We wouldn't be here right now. Like that literally changed everything. That literally set everything that was going to happen. Like it wouldn't have been a case. There was no crime, you know? The only thing that maybe they would have sued a 17-year-old civilly for saying that they guarantee the money back, but that was also on the investors for not checking that there was no physical assets to guarantee the money. So it would have all been legit because that first round of concerts I did was legitimate investment. Everything was good. It was when they started to lose, like the money was raised legitimately, but the losses and then the next round of, capital being raised, that's when everything starts to deteriorate.
Yeah. So, we knew each other a little bit before the Tuxedo era, but during Tuxedo is really where we connected. What's one of the craziest things that you remember from the Tuxedo days of problem solving besides Blau and getting arrested, which we talked about on your pod?
I always think like my favorite, every night was problem solving, there was nights where there was angry, like shady investors that were like, I was locked in my office one night. They took my wallet. They were taking the TVs out. I think you were in there a couple times. I remember like, I would always get so lucky, coming up with the money because, in the hip hop business, you have to pay in cash, usually right before they go on. I remember even the Webby show, like I had Chris Fury, like seconds away. I didn't even have the money and he was meeting me at the office and I miraculously like raised it from like 5 or 6 people and I had the money for him. And same for Kidding, just all these scenarios. But my favorite like Tuxedo story of like pulling it off was the Steve Aoki show. And that was just, I don't know how I got away with it, but I did. And that night, so a week before, Steve Aoki was supposed to play at Western Connecticut State University, and that holds 5,000 people. They had sold, I think, like 3,000 or 4,000 tickets already. WestCon canceled Hyperglow, and the city canceled it because of an event that happened with Dayglow, Life in Color, like 6 months prior. So because of my relationship with Hyperglow, they had played at Tuxedos before in the past years. They called me and they said, hey, originally Steve Aoki was supposed to come for an after party, but they called me this time and they said, hey, Steve Aoki's coming to your club. And I remember that phone call because it was a Tuesday. The show was going to be Friday, I think. Friday or Saturday. It was a Friday, yeah. And I'm getting the call on a Tuesday, and this is every club owner's dream. I'm 19 years old, or actually I was 20 at the time, and they're like, Steve Aoki's playing your club this weekend. So what ends up happening is that WestCon has their own ticketing site, so they refunded all their ticket sales because the show wasn't happening. But Hyperglow had a second ticketing account that they were selling tickets that had about 2,500 people. They weren't refunding those. They were going to get transferred to my club. So now the club is branded as it's happening at Tuxedo Junction. There's 2,500 tickets sold. At this point, I had already lost a trial. Feds are down my back. City of Danbury's down my back. And I was communicating at the time with like the fire marshals and stuff. And I said, hey, because they had gotten wind that, 4,000 or 5,000 tickets were sold. I said, no. WestCon refunded all the tickets. Like, it's a fresh slate. They had no idea about Hyperglow's ticketing site. And they confirmed with WestCon. They were like, okay, this all adds up. So I said, yeah, we're just selling tickets the day of. Like, everything's legitimate, no worries. Now it's the day of the show. Now, I knew at this point, I'm a seasoned club owner. I've been doing it for years now. I knew we had to let doors open early to ensure there wasn't rowdiness and stuff. I think it was a 6 o'clock doors opening we advertised, and the show would start at 7, doors at 6. Well, I opened doors at 5 that day to get the line moving. Lines moving and everything, and then at 6 o'clock, the fire marshal shows up. And this is a young fire marshal that was like in cahoots with the mayor, was out to get me. And the only caveat, the difference to this instance was that he had a clicker in his hand. What we normally do in the club business is you have 2 clickers. You have 3 clickers. You have one that is how many people are in, and one is how many people are out. So if, say, the fire marshal comes, he says how many in, how many out, 3,000 in, but then 1,500 out, so you have 1,500 still in there. And then your third clicker is the real number of how many people entered the night, and it's fake. Like, sometimes we would have security. I would tell my head security, hey, for every 10 people that go in, click 1, So this time, the fire marshal shows up. This is the first time this had ever happened to me. I see his hand is in his pocket the whole time when he shows up at 7. And he had showed up at 7. He said his hellos. My dad's at the door too. And he's like, is anyone inside yet? And we said, no, we literally just opened. We got 10 on the clicker. Had he walked in that door, he would have seen there was 500 or 600 people already in the club. But everyone was very mellow because there was no DJ on yet. It was background music. The club was already filled. But so he's standing there and I see him in his pocket. He's not lifting his hands out. They're both in there. So he has 2 clickers himself. So I see what he's doing and I go up next to him and I hear him clicking and I'm like, holy shit, we're fucked. Because we only have about 500 people in right now.
And you have 2,000 more coming.
We have 2,000 more coming. So I call Al, the old owner of Tuxedos who you've met before, who was on the documentary, and I run down the road and I call him, and at this point, he was always been my mentor, and I said, Al, what do I do? Have you been in this situation? Which he has, but he's like, this is a different ballgame because you have pre-sale tickets. It's not like you could avoid it by not letting more people in. Like, these people need to get in, and you have Hyperglow paying you a fee to do this. So I was like, all right, I'll call you back. I'll figure it out. I tell my team on the walkie-talkies, I need 2 guys on the roof because Tuxedos had that big roof, keeping guard to see if cops were coming and stuff. So they would run across to see the back and run across to see the front of the building. I had guys positioned at the streets. And then I had other guys down the road that when people would park in the parking lot or the garage, say, hey, the entrance is this way. And we brought 1,500 people through the back doors. Artists were going backstage and people are just pouring in the whole time. So the fire marshal himself, they rated our legal capacity at 500 people. It really should have been way more than that with the emergency exit doors, which is why we were able to pull off what, I'm about to say what happens next. People will flip out and say, oh, it was a big fire hazard, this and that. It was perfectly safe. We had enough exit doors. The city rated it lower than it ever should have been. And I could prove it with this aspect. So the fire marshal himself lets 500 or 600 people in, which was the legal capacity at the door. And he says, hey, there's still some people in line, but we'll let them in, as more people leave. I said, yeah, that's fine. At that point, I knew there was 2,500 people in there, give or take, and I was doing some cash deals. Hey, you want to come in to see Steve Aoki, $100 here, this and that. And then he says, all right, I'm going to do my walkthrough now. Everything's going really calm. Keep in mind, there hasn't been one hospital visit yet. Everything's good. Not a single fight. Everything's so smooth, which is really unheard of for a show. He comes in and does his walkthrough of the club. He walks through. The crowd's not rowdy. They're just having a good time, And he does his walkthrough and he comes back out because you can't really talk when you're doing a walkthrough because the music's so loud. And he comes out and he says, yeah, you look about 100 people over or so, but everything's good. Good job tonight. And meanwhile, there's 2,500 people in this building packed like sardines. But that just goes to show with that many people, you can't tell. It wasn't accurately rated, and you had an outdoor patio section that could hold 200 or 300. And with the way the room was laid out, you don't get one vision of the room because it was shaped like an L. And at that time, I didn't even have the front room with the deck, but with the balcony and everything, there's no way to look at it. If you're standing on stage, you're only seeing that main room. You don't see the whole shape. It's impossible to tell. You would need like some type of GoPro or camera. So he comes out and he says that, and he ends up leaving for the night. And that was it. We got away with it. And it was the craziest thing ever.
Dude, I just remember seeing people being funneled through the back too, which is like, it felt sketch at the time too. But I mean, being able to pull it off and pull it off safely too. You know what I mean? Like, because I think that's important, where it's like, if you're going to do something legendary like that, the fact that no one got hurt and it was safe. But I want to bring it to some of the shady characters, because one of my favorite stories, and maybe you can touch on it quickly, is the screwdriver and finger story. Yeah, I mean, that happened like a year and a half earlier.
But we had like this biker we owed money to, borrowing money from shady individuals in the club business. This was the first club I owned, Sky Bar, which was like the front part of Tuxedos. And I had owed him and his crew like a couple $100,000 at the time. And they brought me down the basement and they start whacking my fingers. It's like a cold, morning, and he's just with the end of my end of the screwdriver, just whacking each one until they like got really red. And I thought he was going to take out a hammer or a staple gun because all those were in there, but he didn't want to like leave a mark, because he didn't know if I was a snitch or not. Like at that point, like that was... Like, I think that's what defined in me. Like, I'm never going to rat on someone. Like, I'm not going to turn someone in. I'm not going to run the cops. And I think he was kind of testing the waters there, too, which is what ultimately earned their respect, But I played it cool. Like, and I didn't snitch, I didn't go to the cops.
And at a young age like that, though, it probably put the fear of God into you, dude.
I think I was I don't know, like I've been in some dicey situations, man, even in prison, and I guess it's part of it's like adrenaline, and I've always been resourceful, and, it was by the grace of God and the universe and shit that I got through all of that. And I used it to tell stories and become a platform, like Chief Keef, robbing me of all that money, because he didn't show up for a show and never got it back till this day, or to this day. So I just think everything was like a series of unfortunate events, But like I remember times like you and Dan, like you guys would wait around the end of the night and I'm fucking scraping by because you guys were the best. You would always get paid last, this and that. You weren't like hounding me, and I'm sitting there trying to scrape change up to pay you guys and get you guys the money.
Yeah. You know what I want to bring it to? You went to Penn State.
What do you mean Penn State?
State Penn, my bad, dude.
Penn State, man. I didn't go to college.
No, I know. You went to the School of Hard Knocks, dude.
Yeah, I went to the federal. I went to federal prison. Well, not the state penitentiary. I wasn't even in a federal penitentiary, but it's all the same. Like people get worked up. You say jail, prison, same thing. It's all shit. It's prison. Whether you're in a county jail or a camp, it's still prison. It's all the same thing.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you a little bit about this too, if you're okay sharing it, but. With restitution, I know that you owed a lot with your restitution. And can you explain to somebody like how restitution works and like how they decided what you owed?
So restitution, like it's the dollar amount's always dicey. So I was ordered to pay $480,000. $250,000 of that was never convicted at trial. That was like a mistrial. But the way the federal system works is they can group anything that was during the same time period together. So like the feds they could charge you with 20 counts, you can win 19, they only need one to stick. That's why they do all these charges. And with the money aspect, we didn't necessarily fight it because we knew like, whatever, we'll just pay the money back. And it's not a lot of money compared to these guys that owe millions of dollars. Then at sentencing, once you decide on the restitution, they put it in as an order, and then normally it's due right then and there, but obviously no one has the money to pay that. So you start a payment plan in prison. I was paying like $25 every quarter. And then I went to like $25 a month, and it was like $100 a month at the most. And then a part of my conditions of release after prison was that I would pay $1,000 a month. But you then give your financial affidavits and stuff, and $1,000 is a lot to pay a month, especially on a job you're only making, say $60,000 a year, before taxes.
Yeah, because you have to live off of that money and everything as well.
Apartments, everything like that. So most people don't do that. A lot of the guys I interview, they skate the system where they're paying pennies. It was like towards the last few months of my probation, I was paying me $1,000 a month because I was living at home again. After I got off, I paid a few $100s a month, and then now I'm back to paying $1,000 to $1,500 a month. And then whenever I make a bunch of money in the month, like in May, I gave them a check for $45,000. So it really all depends. But I always pay at least that minimum of $1,000, because if you play ball, they're not going to bother you. I'm paying more than most people. And for the dollar amount I owe, it'll be paid off in the next couple of years as long as I keep doing things and just paying big chunks. But these guys like Billy McFarland and those individuals that owe millions of dollars, Jordan Belfort, they never pay that money back. They don't care.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like, with some of the people that invested, have you spoke with them or anything? Like, do you have any relationship with them, or... because at one point, these are people that you were friends or trusted, you know what I mean? So did this whole thing ruin all those relationships, or do you feel like some of the people are still connected with you?
From the initial, case of those people that are owed money, everyone kind of like abandoned me. And I think a lot of that had to do with like the feds were literally telling these people I scammed them intentionally. And I never got to share my story. And I feel like that changed when the HBO doc came out, because it really showed like this was all one big accident. But the feds, like, you got to remember when they reported it and everyone started talking to law enforcement, I wasn't allowed to talk to them, at that point. It wouldn't have been until after prison I could talk to them. And, that's when the HBO doc came out years later. So for so long, for so many years, they had this narrative that I intentionally did all of these things, which wasn't true. The acts themselves, like, obviously were intentional, but not the thoughts of wanting to, like, I never took $1 from anyone with the intent of I'm going to take this $1 and never pay them back. It was a very different ball game,
Yeah.
So they put that in their mind for the whole time. And I think you can make that assessment because, reading comments on Facebook and social media from the time I got arrested through prison and everything, seeing those people's thoughts, and then when the HBO doc comes out, seeing how those thoughts changed. And that's why I think it plays into my podcast, because when someone shares their whole life story and not just a snippet of the news, that's like that salacious, this is why the person went to prison, it really makes you feel for them. I mean, we see it right now with the Menendez brothers,
Yeah.
They're seeing what happened before. If that was never exposed, no one's opinion would ever have changed.
And the thing, too, about you is, like, the media was really crucifying you, and you really didn't have a platform to share your perspective, So it's like, even if someone doesn't necessarily agree with you 100%, they might just get a better understanding and just kind of get inside your head versus everyone just making you look at, like, you know what I'm saying? They're making you look like this thing that I don't think you are, because as a friend who's known you forever, but it's just when they hear money and, like, not going back to where it should, like, they can easily paint a bad picture, and it's easier for them if everyone's on their side too, because when it comes to, like, sentencing you, it's like this narrative of, and this probably part of, like, a bigger picture too, where it's like, even with your podcast, like, people probably get in more trouble or sentenced worse because of the narrative that's being pushed.
Mm-hmm. And also the media never saw, like you saw, those nights, I did everything myself. Like I couldn't afford to pay anyone. So I would sit there would be a show, I'd clean it up, I'd clean the bathrooms, I was grinding, I was doing whatever I had to do, and no one really saw that. That was never really put out there. It wasn't until the HBO doc came out that the narrative got to change, because it was my story.
Before I move on to this next thing, I will say those tuxedo bathrooms were pretty grody, so you being in there and cleaning them is like, if they saw that, they should have been with you in the, yeah.
Dude, I remember, like, doors would be open and I'm, like, running across the laundromat trying to take ticketing money that was coming in to go get change for the bars, and we were running to the dollar store down the road. I didn't have my license, so I'm pushing the shopping cart full of waters and shit to resell. It was just, I did what I had to do, man. It was living very stressful down the wire.
Yeah, and I feel like people like to kind of crucify the dude that's, like, trying to do something. Like, people don't really like uplifting people. You know, they do when they're winning, but like when negative things start being said, it's almost like a mob mentality where it's like people that you don't even know or people that you met once down and it's like, oh, I always knew that kid was up to no good. But then it's probably the same thing now with your podcast. It's like, oh, I always knew Ian would make something. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's weird having like this public persona. Like, how do you deal with a lot of people with the feedback of like positive and negative?
I mean, now the negative doesn't even bother me because the negative is not necessarily about me anymore. The negative is about the guests that come on the show. And, you know, if there's people that have something negative to say about me at this point, then it really doesn't affect me the way it used to. There's tons of positive feedback about the show and everything. And a lot of people that are now new listeners don't even really know my story too in depth, because it's now bigger than me, you know?
Yeah.
The HBO doc's not up anymore. I mean, they see what they see on Vice, but the hook of the show is the guests, and then they kind of figure out that I've been to prison myself too. So it's a really interesting dynamic, and it's interesting also to see people from the past now try to come back into the door, which I know better than to let that happen. I think you saw better than anyone. I always had different groups of people around me, like from when I first started in the concert business to then the club. Like when you're meeting celebrities, and you know this too because you work with like celebrity artists, there's always someone trying to work an angle or, you know, text you. Like I got so many texts, hey,
man, yeah.
Can you get Chevy to do this? Can you do this? You know, can you help me with Mike Tyson? And, you know, like, I get where they're coming from because that was old Ian. Like I would have asked you for whatever back then, but now I understand the boundaries of it and the respect level, and I'm building these organically, you know?
You have to too. And the thing too is like when people just ask for something, it's like you got to build the relationship up. You got to provide value. You know what I mean? You can't just come in just being like, hey, I saw you were Chevy. Let's make something happen. No, it's like, Ian, how can I help you? Help you for 8 months and then ask, you know what I mean? And like, even then, you know, so it's like, you just gotta, if you're somebody out there who wants to make something happen, it's not what I, or what you can do for me. It's what can I do for you? You know what I mean? And that's the way, if you have that mentality, I always think you'll see success. Cause it's like, you're not so focused on me. You know?
I mean, I was doing the podcast for a year before we even brought up Webby coming on the show, you know, and that was a big play for us because that was like, he's a big name and he has an interesting story and he doesn't necessarily share that story with too many people. And that was like a big play for you to do for me. And that kind of like, you know, opened up new doors and stuff.
And it's cool though, too, because with your podcast though, and even with mine where it's like, it provides a lot of value to people too, because they get to share their story and it's like, it's not just them putting it out. It's like me asking you versus like you just saying, because it's like, you're more curious about their stories and it gives them an opportunity to get it out without them having to do it on their own, you know? Mm-hmm. But I want to pull to some of your prison experience, right? I guess some of my favorite stories with you involve fingers because we had the screwdriver, now we got the one getting bitten off, dude.
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting story. That was like my first couple weeks in the detention center, and a guy skipped another guy in line because in the detention center, they bring a cart up with the food. I think it was lunchtime. They had all the trays and everything. We're waiting in line. I'm like right behind these guys. This guy cuts it. And it just 1 second, everything's normal, quiet, talking. The next second, it's a fight. And they're just like swinging on each other because there's only one guard. So that one guard's not going to like intervene. He called for backup. These two are just swinging it out. And then all of a sudden, like the place kind of goes quiet and you see like this finger fly across the room, blood spraying. And the guy's like, he bit my finger off. He bit my finger off. And then you just see the finger on the floor. That was my first time really getting locked down for a fight because you're locked in yourself for like 2 or 3 days after a fight like that. And we got bag lunches because the food got like contaminated or they were worried about that. So that was like seeing my first real like, holy shit, you know, prison moment.
Yeah, I bet you didn't cut any lunch lines after seeing that, dude.
No, prison has a lot of petty rules, you know, which it puts you into perspective. Like when you're out and about, like I see like these Karens and people just like getting into arguments. Like say at a Starbucks, the line's too long. People get nasty to the workers. Like you do that in prison, you're getting stabbed.
Getting your finger bitten off.
Yeah,
dude.
so I just like, I don't, like if someone's run, like I'm never going to give like someone a hard time for like being late or like at a restaurant or any of these things. But you see what some of these people do. And it's like, dude, just chill out, you know?
Do you find that you were like this even pre-prison, or like this is something that prison kind of changed your perspective on?
I think just as you get older and after prison, like I'm more patient now than ever. I think like if I had this lifestyle back then, I would already be like now. Like I need this celebrity on the podcast now. Like I wouldn't be enjoying the process as much. I needed like those big acts. I needed to speed everything up. But I also think a lot of it had to do with I was on a deadline back then because I was trying to build the club up and sell it before I, you know, if I was trying to avoid prison. But now I'm playing the long game, patience, building, making the right connections. You know, it's not, I think old Ian, like if I was in a room with some of the people I've been in the room with would say, hey, come on the pod, do this, do that. Now I'm meeting people. Like I've met Tyson a few times, just building relationships, Chevy, things like that, you know? So I think that's what is one of the takeaways I've learned from it.
Yeah, I want to talk to you too about your dad because your dad's a phenomenal chef.
You're only saying that because he's listening right now.
No, it was on. Listen, before I even knew he was here, it was on the paper. Dude.
This is a setup.
No. But yeah, your dad's a phenomenal chef. Do you think that had to play a part in your prison hustle?
No, because I was never into cooking until after prison. I was always the behind the scenes guys. I mean, the front of the house crew. Like I was an event planner and stuff. So I did like when I started working for him, I was a waiter, I was a captain. I always worked front of house. I made a little pizza, learned how to make pizza when I worked at the corporate center, the Matrix, before prison, like in high school and stuff. But that wasn't my passion. I hated smelling like food and working in the kitchen, getting dirty. And the kitchen guys, you know, would leave early and stuff. I don't know. I like being out in the field. You know, I always thought the kitchen was the hard job. But then when I went to prison, when I worked in the kitchen there, and when I got out and I found myself working at a pizza restaurant and then cooking at Whole Foods, that became my passion. Working for my dad, I worked for my dad for several years after prison. So that was like really, I was into my roots with cooking. So that kind of developed after, but it was always kind of in me.
When you're in jail, though, what makes you be like, my hustle is prison cheesecakes, though? You know what I mean? What made that idea, and then what made it work?
Someone was actually doing it. It was all timing because you can't just go to a prison and create a hustle someone else is doing and step on their toes. That was passed on to me. There was another guy when I got to the camp, because this was like 2 years in now to my sentence. He was leaving, and my bunkmate had made prison ice cream. And I had seen the cheesecakes, tried it, and I took an interest to it. I was like, how do you do this? And he shared me the recipe. He showed me, and he gave me his business and his clientele. And it was me and another guy that had businesses, but the other guys wouldn't like to shop at my competition because he was in the dog wing. So no one wanted a piece of hair, a dog hair in the cheesecake. But yeah, I would make like 2 cheesecakes every Friday and Saturday, and you'd get like 6 or 8 slices. You pre-sell the slices. It was like $2 or $3, and you'd make like $30 or $40.
You got to explain to me what the dog wing is, because I'm not even familiar with this, dude.
So it's where they chop up the dogs to eat. No, I'm kidding. So in the dog wing, these are dogs before they go. You're acclimating these dogs before they go to be like therapy dogs or dogs for disabled individuals. These are dogs that are like coming straight from the pound or whatnot, and you're just teaching them basic sit, stay commands, being around people, and then they'll go on to the actual training to work with these types of individuals. And you live with them. They sleep in your room. It's 1 dog per 2 people. And your job is to watch the dog, bathe the dog, walk the dog, everything. That's your job. You're paid to do that.
You know what I want to talk to you about? Because this is kind of like the TikTok that kind of launched everything, but I want to dive deeper into the story of it, is that you were in the shoe. You know, what was the experience when you first got there and then just being there?
Yeah, the shoe, like I did like 6 months in the shoe. It's how I lost all the weight, really, because you're only eating, 3 meals a day, and it was miserable. It's like you're very claustrophobic because you go from, that was like my first night in prison was kind of like in a shoe type setting, but I was only in there for a couple days. And then you experience the freedom of prison in the yard, but then when that's taken away from you and you're in a room half the size of this, and when you have a cellmate and he's shitting and farting and peeing in front of you on the toilet, and you can't leave. I think that's like the worst part about it. It's just like you're in this room confined there. You only get 3 showers a week, which they come and they handcuff you and move you to a different cell, which is like also a shower. Some shoes do have a shower built in, and you're forced to just read or do push-ups or sit-ups. You're taking once a day for an hour in the morning, Monday through Friday only for rec. So every time during the weekends, you're always locked in your cell. You had to talk to people. You talk to people through the bars. At one point, I became like the orderly, and they called me Squints from the Sandlot, and I was like painting the cells in Danbury. But that was, I would say that was the worst aspect about prison.
You know, and as you tell me this, dude, like, and knowing you as a person and knowing what you were sentenced for, like, I don't think anybody like that deserves something like that to me. To me, that almost seems like overly abusive, you know, and like maybe that's a problem with the, like, I could see somebody who, you know, is a chomo, a term that I learned from you, deserving that. I could like, or like murder, but it's like, why are people, like, you know what I mean? Why did you end up there when, I mean, your crime really wasn't warranting that in my eyes.
Well, I mean, that's the problem with prisons is that they're putting a large classification of people into these facilities, you know? It's not just, maybe more so at the camp, you have non-violent offenders, but at the low, you have guys that could have a 30-year sentence for murder, work their way down to a low, and you still are with violent people or sex offenders and stuff. So it's a flawed system, but those moments, I had no idea that all those months and hours and days I spent in the shoe set me up for what I have now. Like, I have everything I have now because of that shoe story. Like, the shoe story is what blew me up. That got my start. That's when I knew the thing had legs.
Yeah, dude, because, I mean, you hear about it, and, like, you know, I know you, but you look at you, and even what I was saying before, like, you're not someone who is, like, and you can correct me on this, but, like, you don't strike me as somebody who is usually in the shoe, but maybe I'm wrong to think that maybe it's just a variety of people.
There's a variety. I mean, most people go in the shoe, like, I guess there's a lot of cell phone infractions and stuff, and those are the type of people you would find like me. But it's silly. Like, if the person's caught with a cell phone, you don't need to put them in the shoe for 6 months. Take away their good time, take away the phone, you know, but the shoe, I don't think that meets the, you know, the crime.
It's very inhumane.
Yeah, because it technically is a crime to have a cell phone in prison, but the majority of people that have the cell phones in prison at these lows are not orchestrating new crimes. So it goes back to, which is what they're kind of doing now, give them iPads. I mean, Joe Exotic's in federal prison, and you're able to book him for a podcast if you pay him. He has an iPad, you know, and they have social media on there. They have different things. That's what they need to be doing. Put someone in the shoe if there's a huge fight or something like that. Or
someone gets hurt.
A stabbing. Yeah, then, okay, use it. You don't need to use it for as long, or send them to a higher security prison. But putting someone in the shoe for months and months and months, that doesn't make sense.
Did you find that there were, you know, guards and stuff that were power tripping too while you were there?
Yeah, you have that everywhere. I mean, that's no different than a mall cop or any type of job. There's always, in any position, there's always someone that's going to try to abuse their power. And especially in the prison setting, you have guys that are high on their horse, that want to be the super cop, that want to be Superman, that want to make your lives miserable than it already is.
Yeah, but why did you find that they would, like, want to make your life miserable? Is it because you think they're miserable themselves, or, like, why would they? Because to me, like, I don't know, I wouldn't want to spread misery and make things worse. It's already bad enough that you're in jail. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, you come to find, like, some of these guys single. I mean, you look at some of these guys, maybe they're living at home with their mom, or they were bullied in high school, or they couldn't become a cop, right? The bad ones, for whatever reason. And then they're in prison and they're listening to phone calls with a guy that's doing a 10-year sentence, but still has a hot, attractive woman at home, keeping money on his books, taking care of him. It could be out of jealousy, you know? That's got to be a big part of it. Doing better off than maybe he's doing. They have access to see how much money's on your books, your phone calls, all that. And it's normally those types of guys that are the worst, you know? The ones that don't have a stable home life, because that translates to their job.
What's that feeling when you finally get out of the shoe?
Oh, it's definitely great, you know, like you're able to move around and you just go back to a routine. I think the best part is food, because you go from no commissary to now you can spread out and eat new things and do different things. Because you're in the SHU, you're only given 3 meals a day.
Yeah, and then going even further down the timeline, what's that feeling when you finally get out of jail?
Oh, it was a great feeling. I mean, the last year I was at the camp, so it's a lot of freedom, you know? But when you're really home, like I remember I actually smuggled a phone out of the prison to bring with me on the plane back so I could like post on my Instagram. It was cool. It was a cool experience. I was most excited to get an iPhone again because there's not really any iPhones in the prison.
Was there a huge technology leap from when you went in to when you get out? Because I hear about that you weren't in for that long though in the grand scheme, but like I hear about people that'll go in and then, you know, they'll be in there for 20 years almost before the iPhone came out. Now they're here and technology is advanced. Did you have like any of that happening while you were in jail?
I think the biggest things were like there was obviously like I think I went in with like an 8 or 9 iPhone, and then now we were at like the 11 or the 12 by that point. And then the other thing was smart TVs. I had never used a smart TV before prison, and then I get home, my parents have a smart TV in the den, and I was able to like watch YouTube videos on the TV of like the club, and I remember sitting there, I was like, holy shit, this is cool. That was like the biggest evolution.
It's kind of full circle too now, because now you could watch your own podcast on the TV too.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube's doing a great job. They're really competing with TV, you know. I get so many mentions on my Instagram of people watching it from their bed on the YouTube. I think that's so cool, and that's what Spotify's doing now with video. Like Apple needs to step their game up and have video. That's TV, you know. These podcasts, these interview type things is a new type of TV, especially my format.
My prediction is that YouTube probably overtakes all of them eventually just because they have the output. You know what I mean? And like, you and I can't just upload to Netflix if we want to, but we could upload to YouTube. And, you know, think of all the creators out there that are, you know, moving to these platforms and creating fan bases and audiences that actually watch their stuff. Like, it's like how Uber doesn't own any cars. You know what I mean? They just own the service. It's like YouTube, I'm sure they have like YouTube original shows, but like, a lot of the popular shows are just creators that are going out and doing it on their own. Yeah,
I mean, and also I feel like you're going to find more producers making deals with YouTube, because why will a documentary producer, and most of these don't even get picked up, Netflix barely picks up docs, like they do a few a year. They could bring it to YouTube, and if YouTube's willing to push it into their algorithm, you know, they'll make more money as a creator. You know, like that episode, I have episodes on my channel that have made $10,000. For a 2-hour interview. I didn't even get that much for the HBO doc, you know?
It is insane too. And you know, I just got accepted for monetization on my YouTube.
Congratulations. It's a big play.
It is a big play though. And it's kind of exciting how it does it too, because, you know, the way YouTube has it set up, it's very rewarding because, you know, with my song royalties, if I drop a song today, I'm not seeing those royalties for 90 days after. YouTube, from my experience so far, I'm seeing them the next day of like what the video did the day before. You know what I mean? So it's a very rewarding system that they have in place. But I do want to talk about, you know, what I consider the social media Ian era. But there's one thing I want to touch on before we get that. And I want to talk about the Whole Foods era before, like when you got out of jail, but before social media, Ian, because I do think when you're, you know, if you're coming out of prison or any low situation, that it's important to get back on your feet. And I feel like Whole Foods really provided stability in your life that allowed you to even get where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, when I first got on social media, they thought I had just gotten out of prison, because in like the prison content creator field, a lot of these guys get out of prison and start going on and sharing their story. Like JD started his content like a couple months after getting sentenced to house arrest and things like that. So people thought I had just gotten out, but in the reality was I was already out for like 3 years at that point. I had built a life. You know, Whole Foods gave me things that entrepreneurship years ago had never given me. It was the first time I had a stable, you know, I had my own apartment. I was paying my bills on time. I had my own car insurance, health insurance. I got a dog. I had a relationship, like credit, you know, all of these things that had I went back into entrepreneurship as soon as I got out of prison, and wouldn't have gave me. And that goes back to patience and not chasing like that instant gratification. When I got out of prison, I wanted to own a club again and get back into that, you know, and I'm glad I didn't, especially because COVID would have happened a year later and that would have hurt me, you know. Although I do regret, I wish that I had started the podcast if I had the idea for it, because it would have blown up in COVID. If I was making the TikToks during COVID, it would be mega level, you know, because everyone was consuming that, but everything played out the way it did. But working that job and grinding from, you know, making $15 an hour to working my way up and just proving that you could get out of, you know, federal prison with these felonies on your record and move up to a management level position. That year I was going to leave, I was going to make over $100,000 with the overtime. And it was fun. I met new relationships, people skills, dating. It was a fun time, you know, until it's not, until entrepreneurial Ian mind, which was always in there. Cause there would be times me and you would talk and I'd say, nah, I'm done with that. Like Whole Foods, that I really thought that was going to be the rest of my life for a long period of time. And it's just like that spark, like a lot of drug dealers and people that were committing like criminal enterprisers that I talked to, it was always in them to be entrepreneurs. And you see a lot, they were able to build a business years later. It just takes you time to get that spark to ignite again.
And I'm glad it did for you, because I remember like phone calls that we'd have too. And like, I'd be like, you know, what's the next thing? What are you doing? Like, wait, and you'd be like, I'm just leveling up at Whole Foods, which like honestly probably was a good thing for you so that you can get your foundation built again. But like, as someone who's always known you and everything, I'm like, nah, like Ian's going to figure out something. And it makes me happy that everything that we're seeing right now with the studio, the podcast, everything, how it's leveling up is like,
because of you.
I wasn't going to say it.
No, I mean, but
because of you, though.
You need someone to get you to think outside the box. I mean, this is important in relationships. Like if you're dating someone you don't like or anything like that, any type of thing in life, like if you have someone that gives you a different perspective, because at the time, like we had talked about it over the years, but like at that summer of 22, like there was things happening at Whole Foods where they were giving promotions to people that didn't deserve it. And like I was hustling my ass off, and it was still the level I wanted to be at was still years down the line. Whereas like as an entrepreneur, the level I wanted to be at could happen the next day if I put my mind to it. So you mix that reality, that corporate mindset with a birdie in your ear. In this case, it was you saying there's something more out there that brought that spark, that it ignited that spark that was always there. So I think it's so important to have people that give you a different perspective, that push you a little bit. You know, if a dating, relationships, anything, just giving you a different idea of, hey, what about this? You know? And you did that for me. And that's when I made that hump. It took me a while because I procrastinated all summer. I remember you were like, hey, when's that video coming out? I said, oh, I just ordered the stand and the lights. I didn't need any of that shit because my most viral videos are literally me in a car. But I remember setting up the HBO poster and getting the foam panels and the mic and shit I didn't end up using, you know, after the first video.
The iMac too, yeah.
Yeah,
dude.
I bought an iMac, like just all this shit, you know?
But I think it's important that you say that too, just because a lot of people get in their own way sometimes thinking it needs to be all this thing, but really you have a phone and outside with the right lighting, it's like you're good to go.
I see so many people ask me like, hey, I'm starting a podcast. I just bought this, and that. I say, hold up. Go in your car with your iPhone and just start making content and see if your idea works. Test the market with your personality. You don't need the podcast yet. That'll come. You can make money faster on your phone building your own personal brand than you ever will doing a podcast off the bat. Be original, brand yourself. Look at my studio. Yours is that we're filming it right now is way nicer than mine over there, but that one garners millions of views. It's just a curtain, 2 cameras, and 2 seats, and 2 lights. That's a basic setup. Obviously, the cameras are and the gear itself, but that room itself cost a couple $100 to make.
And that's what I'm saying. And like people really can overthink the process, dude. And it kind of goes back to what we said earlier. It's like just start where you can and don't overthink it, because there will be a time for you to level up. You know what I mean? And like go to the next level, but you don't want to invest into something that doesn't work. You know what I mean? So it's like, just test the waters and see, you know, how you get there. And I mean, your level up has been insane, even from just that first TikTok to now, because at what point do you go from just doing social media content to being like, oh, let's do a podcast?
So I started social media in August. By that January of 23 last year, almost 2 years ago, I have the podcast. It was a slow start. It was a grind, you know, like I remember the days of it would take 3 to 4 days to get 1,000 views on that first YouTube video. Now I judge it by, can it hit 10,000 in the first 24 hours, you know? And I didn't even have an audio platform following on Spotify and Apple. You have to build that. There's no algorithm pushing that out. That is a grind to get that, you know? And it's so hard. Like I tell people, if you have 200 listeners on those, that's great. Because those are people that search for your podcast to do that. And obviously, the more you post, eventually it'll make it in the algorithm. But if you post, perfect example, if you post a podcast episode to Spotify or Apple as your first episode and you don't promote it at all, no one's going to see that, like to your friends or family or anything. No one will see that because they're not pushing it out there. But if you do it on YouTube and you title it right, or on TikTok, it's pushing it out to people.
No, and it's the truth too. And it's just like, just having an understanding of what's working and what's not too. You know what I mean? I think that's something important that you kind of grow over time too, where it's like, when you were doing your podcast, what did you find was the first thing that was really working for you?
I definitely read all the comments about, you know, like I came into every episode with questions, like a sheet of paper, and I overthought it. And then I watched other podcasts, I learned, I took the feedback, and I just kept working on it, and I developed my rhythm, and I always had a certain format that it'll be in chronological order. I knew that going into it, that it would be interview based, and I built up, and then I went to 2 episodes a week, and then I did an episode about my story that went super viral on all of these platforms, on like No Jumper, that hip hop site, all these different ones, and then I went to 3 episodes a week, and now I'm at 5 episodes a week. But the biggest thing I learned is consistency. All it is consistency. And putting out the same product every time. And that's where a lot of people fail because they don't make that.
And one of the things that's probably very rewarding to you is that you get to highlight, you know, people's stories and what they've gone through on your platform that they might not have the opportunity to otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's cool. And I think that you could take someone that no one's ever heard of and it can garner millions of views. I mean, that's why TikTok is so powerful. I'll take a story that's non-celebrity and it'll do millions of views, just that person sharing their story and insight, you know? Like, that's incredible. And I don't know many other podcasts that could do that to that level with just ordinary, average people and people society looks at as like the bottom of the earth. So you're changing the narrative. You're changing people's perspectives on these people. And, you know, you're doing good in the process and you're creating a business.
And you've grown this platform to the point where it makes sense for you to meet a Hulk Hogan. It makes sense for you to meet a Jelly Roll. It makes sense for you to meet everybody that you've been meeting. You know, how does that feel, you know, knowing that you built this from the ground up to the point where you're getting in the rooms with some of these huge iconic names?
It's really cool because life's come full circle because I used to do that, you know, during the club days, but I never enjoyed it. Like, I think out of all the artists I work with, I have pictures with just a couple, like the Chainsmokers, Laid Back Luke, maybe a couple others. Now, like, it's just so much different. It's a different vibe, and I also don't need them for something. Back then, I wanted those artists. I needed them. I wanted them to promote the club or this and that. Now it's meeting people, forming relationships, like the Tyson, you know, sponsorship. That never would have happened without forming the relationship. Like, if I asked them right off the bat the first day, hey, you want to sponsor the podcast? You learn, you grow, you meet people, you know, and you be kind to people and you talk with them and you just continue to work hard. And my podcast is not celebrity driven. Will it be cool to get those big names that have went to prison? Absolutely, you know, but I'm not, you know, it's not like a make or break type thing. We're growing at a really awesome rate. Like, I think Instagram and YouTube are some of the hardest platforms to grow on, and to see those numbers just pick up and grind, you know, it's a grind. And to see it from the bottom, like 2 years ago, I did not have this platform. HBO didn't give it to me. Like, I had a couple thousand followers from Instagram. I had nothing else. I built that all on my own.
Yeah, and you know, I'm going to start winding this down, but it's interesting to me because it's like, you know, at Whole Foods, you had an opportunity to make $100,000 that year. And I've always been somebody who has never prioritized the money because, like, I prioritize the thing that's, like, the cool thing, like, what I actually want to be doing with my life. Did you have some of that sentiment where it's like, do I want to be at Whole Foods or do I want to give this thing a try because this might be something that ends up being cooler for me?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me it was, I don't know if it was necessarily about the money because I knew there's options to make more money. I think it was more of do I want to be at Whole Foods doing the same thing with the same routine and never really have an opportunity to pay back the restitution or anything? Like, that's what I wanted to try for, because at Whole Foods, I'm paying a few $100 a month. Like, there's a certain cap. What was the most I could make at Whole Foods? Maybe $250 a year as a store leader that was 5 or 6 years out, you know? And once I quit, like, it took, like, people will come to me and they'll say, how long till I start making money with my content and stuff? That was not my plan when I go into it. Like, my thing is very strategic in the sense where pictures I post with celebrities and stuff, you're not making that money right then and there. You're playing the long game. So when I first started, I wasn't making any money. Facebook, I was making money on, owed me $8,000 for months because my tax paperwork got screwed up. It was off by a digit. So I lived off my credit cards. I maxed $30,000 on my credit cards for months. And when TikTok at the time wasn't paying me anything, even though I was getting millions of views, and I was driving Uber and I was doing OnlyFans, and I was just grinding, doing whatever it took. And when you get to that level, like, that can humble you. And it really brought me back to, I was doing whatever it took for tuxedos, you know? And I was also, like, adamant on, I'm not going to take any money from anyone to help me build this. I'm going to build this from the ground up on my own. And that's what I did.
Yeah, and now you're at a point too, and I don't know, I'm not going to put it all the way out there, but I know that you recently made a deal that really kind of gave you a fresh start and kind of took big pressure off of you because of the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool to see that the thing has legs, that it brings in consistent income. And also, like, I don't get to keep all of it because there are investors now and stuff, because it's evolved into that. And I didn't bring on investors until I was comfortable that they would be repaid, which they did. And it's just like, it's crazy to see the business aspect, and it's also crazy to see how it's just in its infancy stage. Like, I'll be with execs and they see our numbers and they're like, wow. Because keep in mind, we barely have any advertisers on it. So these numbers are being driven by social media, and it's just, it's awesome to see it grow.
Yeah, and, you know, for somebody who, in my eyes, hit a rock bottom, now to podcast superstar, what's some advice that you would give to somebody who's kind of in the rock bottom stage of their life right now?
I just think you gotta, I know it's cliche, but, like, never give up and being consistent. Like, I have not missed a single day of posting in almost 2 years. You know, it's been over 2 years actually now, since I started in August of 22. Every single day, man. And I honestly, I got lazy in the beginning of this year. Like, I went down to one short a day on my YouTube, like one TikTok at one point. I still posted every day, but I got lazy and I was outsourcing my clips, and the momentum slowed down, and I was in a rut for a little bit, seeing not the steadfastly growth. And I brought that back. I'm like, I got rid of the people that were doing my clips, and I went back to doing my clips. And what do you know? Like, this month we're up 20,000 subscribers on YouTube. All the numbers are 10 times what they were, 3 or 4 months ago. That's because I'm back to doing the clips, being in that grind. I got rid of all my clients. I was trying to build something. See, where I've always gone wrong in my life was going into the wrong thing that was not meant for me. I had no business going to electronics. I had no business being a concert promoter at arenas. What I was good at was those club nights, which I should have stuck with, or tuxedos was successful. It was just the debt was too out of hand by that point, So I had a successful podcast business or whatever. Why am I trying to double dip and make clients and shit? That doesn't make sense. So when I started to see that, I had to reel back in the reins. I'd rather be broke and doing my podcast than to start getting into that groove of working for someone else again. I don't want to do that. I want to work for me. I want to make my own schedule. I'll help people, but I'm not sitting here editing for clients anymore. That's not what I want to do.
I relate to that sentiment too much because, dude,
yeah, you taught me that.
Well, dude, it's like a thing too where it's like, and I say this to people, sometimes the $100 for yourself is better than the $1,000 from the client, because it's like, oh, that $100 I just made was a Mike Squires $100. Like, I didn't need anybody. That's strictly off me. But and don't get me wrong, sometimes you need those client $1,000 to like fund your stuff in the beginning. But if you can get to the point where you're fully self-sufficient now, you don't need anybody else. You don't have to rely on anybody. You could come here, shoot podcasts. Granted, you have like a lot of guests and stuff like that. But you know what I'm saying? It's your platform that you built up. It's all you. So it's like you're not worrying on somebody else for your paycheck is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, I had like the studio I got it up to in a very quick time, like 10 grand a month in revenue, you know? And I definitely took a hit by giving that up because now I have to pay out of pocket for like the rent and stuff. But I'm also like helping a good friend build his business here, and hopefully that will work out for him. But I'm using this more like this second studio. Like I always offer guests that are local. Hey, you want to use it? Like I met a NYPD cop the other day who has his own podcast now. Studio's yours. It takes me 5 minutes to throw it together for you with the way AI is, which is something you showed me, and stuff like that. And to film it, I don't mind. If I'm here already, use the studio. You know, this isn't like New York City where someone's going to charge you hundreds of dollars. It's the clips. It's all of this that take the time, but that's where people have to put the work in. But like a guy like you could easily have $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 in clients a month. You know, I could get clients tomorrow. That will always be there, but I don't want to do that. And I understand now why you don't want to do that either. And that's a really powerful tool.
Yeah, because I know you've heard stories of me turning down stupid money opportunities. But I want to pull this to the end zone with this last question, Ian. What's your message to the world?
Don't be Mike Squires.
Damn. Well, nobody could if they tried, right?
No, I think that like the biggest thing is like, you know, be empathetic and show compassion to people. Like get to know the person before you judge them. Everyone has a story. Take a second to learn more about how the person got to where they are. And I think that's what the world is starting to do a little bit more. Like we were talking about the Menendez brothers. We look at my story. You look at everything, learn about the roots of who that person is. I mean, Jelly Roll is a great example. People are focusing on his past now to show, and he emphasizes that. That was the journey he took to get there. And that's what makes him so different, because there's so many artists that don't talk about that.
It's not easy being vulnerable.
Yeah, you have to be vulnerable, be open, and get to know the other person, understand what they went through to get there, you know, and just work hard and go for it.
Yeah, and if anyone who has been listening and tuned in has seen any of my podcasts, just know that the Mike Squires and Friends podcast is not possible without the support of my good friend Ian Bick.
Well, you're leaving us to go get your own studio.
But that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the power of Ian Bick in your studio.
We both help each other, you know. Every interview I always do. Mike Squires, if you looked up the SEO on you, bro, like if you ran transcripts of every interview, you've always been mentioned.
Dude, if somebody's out there listening to this and they want to put an edit together of all the moments where Ian mentioned me, I will pay you for that.
Yeah.
But
you got to pay homage like that. You put me on, you know? You taught me it and you helped me not have to have an editor anymore. You taught me all that. You taught me how to film, to angle. You did all that, you know? So that's why I think I do that for the next person, because you got to pay it forward. I taught Matt how to do that, you know?
Dude, paying it forward is like such an important lesson that I learned, because I've had people help me tremendously when I was younger. And a lot of the time I was like, how do I pay these people back? But realistically, they weren't in a bad situation that I was in that they needed help. But you know, paying it forward is all we can do. You know what I mean? Obviously, still try to do nice things for those people, but, you know, it's really important to pay it forward. And I think when you do, you'll be surprised at what happens, you know, for the people around you. And it's a good back and forth. And, you know, now even from letting me use this space that you have a studio that you ever need in Stamford, Connecticut, dude, you know, so.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you, man. You're a good guy.
You too, dude. Well, thank you for coming on, Ian. It's been a good time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and glad to have you as a friend, dude.
Yeah, you too, buddy. I'm looking forward to some sushi tonight.
Let's go.